is Francis Xiaohui Lin. Today I'm going to present this paper entitled Theorizing Living Heritage, the Asian Display-ness of Architecture and Urbanism Today. Conventionally, especially from a context of Western intellectualism, the idea of heritage has been defined with the main focus on material, monumental, and aesthetic forms of antiquity. In this paper, the changing reception in value in the past in the present time is argued as building the theoretical foundations of living heritage that departs from the conventional epistemology of heritage. It is my argument that Asia today strongly displays implications of the discursive making of living heritage, especially from the manifestations perceived in architecture and urbanism. In this paper, this empiricism is prudently reached from a comparative study of architecture and urbanism observed in Singapore and Japan. The above contextualization implies that heritization is about negotiation of the intrinsic essence of the past and its present universe. Heritage stands for nothing but a discourse, and such a discourse is still dominated by Western intellectualism. However, such a definition becomes problematic when the present standpoint of diversity is held, as the dominant epistemology of the West grants the subalternity once the non-Western practices do not fit into the stability and universality that the consensual view sees. The notion of living heritage, therefore, implies some characteristics that take the needs of present-day life into account. First, heritage in this manner is centered around people rather than object. Second, the identification of heritage is vitally related to reception, and most importantly, the reception is not limited in a form that is legal and permanent. Thirdly, because of the human-centered character, heritage nowadays involves the need for participation in developing a sense of place and social inclusion. Lastly, a focus on the needs of the present-day life in handling heritization means the relationship amongst the past, the present, and the future is never fixed and inert, but instead ongoing and dynamic. To summarize, I reaffirm my argument that the mindset of regional living heritage is somehow post-colonial, and in a contemporary context, it can be defined as an intention of mediating and moderating the flowing status of domination, and the everyday environment implied by architecture and urbanism surely is a pivotal witness. The philosophical reconfiguration of heritage with a focus on identifying the presence hence is crucial and urgent. In my previous studies, I have proposed a concept that is called display-ness, which might be useful for understanding the philosophical essence of living heritage further, especially from the standpoint of seeing architecture and urbanism as its universe, refining the phenomenon musealization. Display-ness subjectifies the neutral character of display when the notion is employed to approach the understanding of the contemporary Asian urban built environment, in which nowadays is noticed with its geopolitical significance. The heritage values, which have been recognized being Asian today, I argue, have transcended the conventional definition and have reflected the geopolitical features of contemporary Asia. The Asian values of heritage perceived in its contemporary built environment, not limited by the example mentioned above, is vivid witness. It is my argument that the Asian display-ness has displayed the collusion built between knowledge and authority, which is homogeneous with the relationship between heritage and governmentality. From the above discussion, the notion of living heritage is related to how the civilization of society is perceived. And such reception in Asian architecture and urbanism today, I argue, is highly associated with the imagery of being modern. Architecturally, the modern movement by no means is politically innocent, but ideologically centered around a Western-centric context. The modernity referred to modernism of architecture in Western Europe and its later relocation to North America, is in which play a vitally important location for the cultivation of the so-called first generation of modern architects worldwide, has built the influential foundation. Based on such a contextualization of modernity, colonial modernity is a unique special temporal edition of modernity based on the particular registration of imperialism in non-Western colonies. The power and knowledge imposition shown by such a particular form of modernity, I argue, somehow represses or delays the emergence of its reflexivity. In Singapore, Kim Sun-tae and William Lim's early works, such as the People's Park Complex, not only echo the colonial modernity imposed by Japanese imperialism, but also repackages it with a signifier of the everyday, displaying an alternative sense of built heritage. Criticized by Ran Koolhaas, the People's Park Complex is a built example of metabolism in Singapore that witnessed the first evidence of an Asian modernity. However, the project for him, more importantly, represented a modern movement of Singapore's Chinatown. From such a theoretical basis, colonial modernity represents a shared characteristic between colonial built objects and cities, particularly referring to a collection of shared experiences. As a notion analyzed above, colonial modernity witnesses the absence of native reflexivity, and consequentially the search of its alternatives becomes aware in the continuous discourse, suggesting similar reactionary statements when modernity was questioned. With recent awakening of the non-Western consciousness through the processes of decolonization, the subjectivation of the colonized communities commences to form the counter-discourse against the ideological imposition caused by colonial modernity. In Japan, Kengo Kuma's design of the Asakusa Cultural Curious Information Center in Tokyo echoes my argument. The built object that Kuma designed for the center definitely is contemporary. The fragmentary and arbitrary manifestations of the building without doubt echo the presence of architecture fashion. However, the function, form, and materiality of the project interestingly imply the display-ness of the Asianized notion of heritage. In Singapore, the Park Royal on Pickering Hotel, designed by Oha, shares the same sense of living heritage through the architectural manifestations of hybrid modernity, by reflecting a different form of the immediate historicity, the contemporary Asian tropical reflexivity. From the observation of the Park Royal Hotel, the greening imagery becomes a registered value of Singapore's historicity. The greening imagery sees its materialization horizontally to string up the enclave of the Singapore River Walk with the adjacent CBD neighborhood. Vertically, to not only functionalize the hotel through the visual making of its location, but also showcase a paradigm of fulfilling the master plan by a private sector. From the comparative studies of Japan and Singapore, I argue the Asian display-ness becomes noticeable from the perspective of living heritage that collects various manifestations of the contemporary Asian multiplicity. This multiplicity is suggestive of a new cultural form made by hybrid um, representations instead of purity. In this study, the notion of living heritage is argued from a focus concentrating on the value construction, not purely of the past, but rather of the past in the present context. What I want to emphasize here is that living heritage witnessed in the contemporary urban Asian built environment underscores nothing about the polemics between tangible and intangible values of the past only, but instead more about the chosen episteme that stands for the immediate historicity of Asia today. More importantly, such historic importance drives away from the conventional conception of heritage that is permanent and universal. What is implied from the Asian urban architecture manifestations is time and space relevant. In conclusion, the Asian architecture display-ness is theorized to highlight a particular quality of the Asian urban built manifestations today that inescapably engage in the interventionism of Western intellectualism. The discursive theorizations of heritage in a contemporary manner share a homology with such a scenario. The presence of historical values, what can be regarded as the forming of living heritage, suggests the pragmatic, quotidian, and location method concerns with the past. From a spatial and visual point of view, the display-ness of contemporary Asian architecture and urbanism therefore implies a critical common divisor moderating the presence of urbanity and the past of cultural tradition to benchmark the consensual values. And this is my presentation today. Thank you for your attention.